So I want to welcome all of you tonight. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator and Trainer for several counties in Southwest Ohio. Tonight, we have several counties represented, the ones that I work with. It's Montgomery, Greene, Warren, and Butler counties. But welcome everybody, and I'm glad you all could attend tonight. We're going to be targeting special needs trust. Now, those who have attended, we worked with guardianship the month of October. So following that is usually the special needs trust. We have Greg Darling here. He's the executive director of the Dayton Foundation. And I did put in the chat box, and we can put it in again, a link to the presentation you'll be seeing tonight so you can reference it later as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Darling, and I made you co-host so you should be able to share your screen.
Can you see it?
Yes.
How do I get?
There should be, yeah, there you go. Full screen.
Well, I can't get to start the thing because I got this black box in front of me. How do I get that small? I've got the bar in front of it. Oh boy.
Slideshow. Can you click on, you mean start the slideshow?
I'm trying to get under it. There we go.
There you go. There you are.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And just for clarification, I'm not the executive director of the Dayton Foundation. I'm the director of the Disability Foundation. But that's a good point to explain our relationship in case you're confused. We are a supporting organization, the Dayton Foundation. And what that means simply is they're kind of our back office. They created us. They actually appoint our board of directors, even though we have a nonprofit board of directors ourselves. It's made up of elder law attorneys and other professionals in the community and advocates. We are employees of the Dayton Foundation, but essentially Dayton Foundation is our back office. But again, the Disability Foundation is a nonprofit organization. We began back in the late 90s when Congress passed legislation to create special needs trust. You may recall about that time, Congress was trying to get their heads around wealthy people giving all their money away and then getting on Medicaid. Well, they tried to prevent that, but they carved out the disabled population because they knew that population needed to have the benefit of private monies for a higher quality of life. So they carved out that population. The reason we exist is for one purpose only, and that really is to help people living with disabilities maintain their public benefits they need so critically, Medicaid, SSI, and still have the use of their private money. So that's really the only reason we exist, but that's what we do. So let's talk a little bit about the need. You're familiar with public assistance programs, I suspect. And on the right, you see the non-needs-based public assistance. You become eligible for these because you earn it. You pay into your Social Security. You're eligible for Medicare because you pay into that over the years. And of course, veteran benefits you earn because you serve your country. All of those public benefits come to you not because of your income, but because you earn them. It's non-needs-based. But where we live is in the needs-based. Medicaid and SSI, supplemental security income, both have asset limits of a couple $1,000s. So you can see the needs-based public assistance is what created the need for special needs trusts. So when Congress created the trust back in '93, they actually created two types of special needs trusts. The individual special needs trust you can get from an elder law attorney in our community, anywhere in the country, actually, and they will custom draft a special needs trust for your child. They will put some bells and whistles in it. It will protect Medicaid and SSI, but it'll be custom drafted for you. And because of that, then, of course, it's going to be a little more expensive because you have to pay the attorney to draft it. You need to find a trustee who is familiar with Medicaid and Social Security regulations to protect it. And you're going to have the bank that'll hold that and handle the distributions, et cetera. So because of that, then to create a special needs trust, an individual trust in this community, it requires significant assets, usually several $100,000 to $500,000 to create that trust, to make it financially feasible. So Congress then created the pooled trust for everybody else, and that's what we administer. We administer a pooled special needs trust. Let's talk about what that means for a minute. Whereas the individual trust just has the assets and it's custom drafted for your child, a pooled trust has already been created. Essentially, you're joining the trust. Our trust was written back in the late 90s. We developed a new one in about 2005. It's been updated a couple of times, but it's the same trust that everybody belongs to. So when you have a pooled special needs trust, you join the trust. The same happens with the money. The money that you place into trust is pooled also. In our case, Key Bank, being the investment trustee, has a trust department up in Cleveland, and the money sits in that trust department. We'll talk a little more about that as we move through this. But the pooled trust, then you have the distribution trustee, which is the Disability Foundation, Key Bank, the investment trustee, so co-trustees. And it's our responsibility to understand the regulations for Medicaid and SSI and to protect that trust. So let's talk about SSI for a second. These are the types of things that SSI excludes from consideration. Of course, the first $2,000, as we talked about. You can have a home, you can have a vehicle, of course, your household effects. All of those things are excluded from consideration for SSI. And you'll see at the bottom, special needs trusts, and then ABLE account. In Ohio, we call it stable. There's the ABLE account. All of these things are excluded when Social Security is considering whether someone's eligible for SSI. So I want to explain what a trust is, because it's an important concept that we'll talk about even more later in this presentation, but I want to explain it and just think about it. It's a relationship. It's a legal relationship. And let me tell you that it's rooted in the Ohio Trust Code. And if you can't sleep some night, just go read that trust code. It'll put you right to sleep. But in any event, this is all, it's a very important concept, a legal requirement, but it's a relationship between someone who holds title to property, but has that obligation to use it for someone else. In our case, we have a fiduciary responsibility, a relationship. Both Key Bank and the Disability Foundation have a fiduciary relationship with the beneficiary. The person, that beneficiary is the beneficial owner and use of that trust, while the money in the trust, while the Disability Foundation holds legal title. But that's a very serious legal relationship between the two. And again, special needs trusts are not considered income or resources. So we talked about the individual and pooled. And again, with the pooled trust, we have created this trust and we then administer it with Key Bank. The money itself, as I said, sits in Key Bank. Every beneficiary has their sub account within that in that trust. Okay, what is a pooled trust under the law? First of all, the beneficiaries, they have to be disabled according to Social Security. You know, I wear eyeglasses. Some could say I'm disabled, but no, I have to meet the Social Security definition. And what that says basically is the person cannot engage in gainful employment due to a disabling condition of a mental or physical nature that is expected to last not less than 12 continuous months or could result in death. That's a very significant high standard of disability. The pooled trust must be managed by a nonprofit. So those attorneys I talked about earlier, the elder law attorneys in the community, cannot establish a pooled special needs trust. It must be established and managed by a nonprofit organization. The Disability Foundation is a nonprofit organization. There are two Ohio-based pooled trusts, two Ohio-based pooled trusts. And I think if you tune in tomorrow night, you'll hear about the Community Fund, the other one that's based in Cleveland, but has a presence throughout the state. A pooled trust must have a sub-account for the money so that that money is pooled, but everybody has a sub-account. And the benefit, by the way, of pooling that money, as you can imagine, is financially, then the leverage is there to have low fees. In our case, we have almost $33 million under active management. So you can imagine the leverage of having that kind of money in a pooled trust really reduces the investment fees compared to if you put it in your local bank. Next, any trust, any special needs trust must be used solely for the benefit of the individual. That's something that Social Security is really honing in on lately. They're looking very closely. It must be used solely for the benefit. So they can't give Christmas gifts. They can't give to their church. They can't give it away. It must be used for their sole and exclusive benefit. A first-party trust, and I'll explain the difference in a second, but a first-party trust is established by one of 5 entities: a parent, a grandparent, the guardian of a estate, the individual themselves, or often by the probate court. Those are the only 5 entities that can establish that trust with the assets of the beneficiary in a first-party trust. A first-party trust must also contain a Medicaid payback clause. So what that says is money that's not retained in the trust at the time of the death of the beneficiary must then first be used to repay Medicaid for all costs incurred on behalf of the beneficiary during their lifetime. That's rather significant. But again, money that's not retained in trust at the time of the beneficiary's death then must be used to repay Medicaid. That's for a first-party trust. So let's talk about the differences. A first-party trust, as I said, are established with assets belonging to the beneficiary. It may be established by those 5 entities, but they must be assets which would belong to the beneficiary. Of course, if the child is underage, a parent can establish it with their assets because the beneficiary is a minor. Third-party trusts, and for those of you that may have heard this presentation before, haven't heard this piece, this is a new part for us. But a third-party trust are assets that have never belonged to the beneficiary. That's significant. We'll talk more about that in a second. We administer 3 trusts at the Disability Foundation. The first trust we developed was an annuity trust. And if you know the Dayton Foundation at all, you would see this is not a surprise. It operates much as a gift annuity. It's a first-party trust, but with the annuity trust, the money that when you put that money into the trust, we will do a computation, a forecast, if you will, and through the rest of the life, expected life of the beneficiary, and we will establish a guaranteed spending amount spending benefit every month that's placed into that account. Doesn't have to be used, but it's available to the client every month for the rest of their life. The problem with that is that these are rather low dollar trusts. The average size trust established with us right now is $30,000. So if you take $30,000 and you're going to equate that or compute that over the life of the beneficiary, it's probably going to be a small amount. So if you need something expensive, you really got to let it build up. And if you're getting maybe $30 a month in your spending account, you have to wait till that really builds up for something expensive. So it's not as popular as it once was. In 2005, we created the Pooled Flexible Spending Trust. It's been updated a few times. The last time was 2014. Same protection from Medicaid and SSI. The difference, though, is theoretically, all that money you put into the trust on day 1, you could take out on day 2 for a distribution if you wanted to. In other words, it's all available to the beneficiary from day 1. The other benefit of this trust is that, such as we had with the stimulus checks last year, you can keep adding to this one anytime you wish to. You establish a trust, and then the person gets an inheritance from Aunt Betty. You can put the money in there. They get a stimulus checks, they put the money in there. Their SSI checks pushing them up against their $2,000 resource limit because they're not getting out a lot and spending. Until they do, you can put the money in the trust. So it's protected. That's the benefit. Those are both first-party trusts. And now we offer the third-party pooled flexible spending trust. It operates the same as the 2014 flexible spending trust, except it's third-party money. Let's start with what first-party trust is. And I already told you this. First-party trust is established by one of those 5 entities: grandparent, parent, guardian of the state, the court, or the individual with a disability. It's money that belongs to that person. Sometimes it comes from an inheritance that's left directly to the individual, or a gift. Often, remember, we serve everybody with a disability, so we get a lot of personal injury claims, settlements, back payments, etc. Those are all examples of money that's given directly to the individual, and they can put it into a first-party trust and protect their public benefits. Remember, a first-party trust must have a Medicaid payback requirement. Again, money not left in the trust is repaid to Medicaid. A third-party trust is different. A third-party trust can be created by anybody except the beneficiary. The beneficiary cannot create their own trust because that's their money. The only money that can sit in the third-party trust is money that has never belonged to that beneficiary. They access it the same way. It's used the same way. Example of this may help you is soon after I started the Dayton Foundation, we were establishing a trust with a mom. And she was saying, you know, the neighbor next door says my son is like a second son to her, and she really wanted to create a trust for him. Well, she couldn't do that because that would be third party. She can't put third party money into a first party trust. Now you can. So we just had one created by the friend, a family friend. They're very close to a family with a disabled child, and they created a small trust for that child. They put some money aside and said, here you go, we're creating a trust for him. You can imagine with a third-party trust, you can think about it, a number of people can create third-party trusts. You can have, a beneficiary can have many third-party trusts potentially, but maybe an uncle, an aunt, a brother, a sister, they all want to create one, they can do that. The third-party trust can be created during your grantor's lifetime. Parents can establish, or an aunt and uncle can establish a trust while they're living, or they can do it through their last will and testament. It's called a testamentary trust. And again, there's no Medicaid payback because the money never belonged to the beneficiary. So this is where it becomes very valuable, especially if you have multiple children. Because we've had people that are hesitant to set up a first-party trust because they know that if their disabled child predeceases the other children, Medicaid's going to take the money. Now with a third-party trust, it can be established that if that should happen, money can go to the other children. And again, can be set up now or deferred. Let me talk a little more about that Medicaid payback again, because there's one part I want to tell you about. Remember I said money not retained in the trust. The Disability Foundation with a first-party trust does retain 25% of the money when the beneficiary dies. Now, I want to be clear about that. That money is not used to pay operating dollars. It's not used to pay salaries or light bills or anything else. We put that money in a fund with the remaining monies of other deceased beneficiaries, and we endow it with the Dayton Foundation, and we grow it. Every year, we spin off the growth in that fund into grants to nonprofit organizations that serve people with disabilities. So that's what happens with that part I said is retained by the trust. So examples of a third-party trust. It may sound a little similar in inheritance, gifts, but the difference is very, very important. It's given directly to the trust. And people that want to set up a testamentary trust can get language from us that you give to your attorney and you write it into the will. So their inheritance is left directly to the trust. It's a very fine point, very, very important one. As opposed to giving it to John Smith, you're giving it to the Disability Foundation third-party trust for the benefit of John Smith. Then it's a third-party trust. The same with life insurance proceeds. And again, people can have multiple third-party trusts. The roles, we have co-trustees. The Disability Foundation is the distribution trustee. It's our responsibility to establish the trust, to work with Key Bank, to understand the regulations of Social Security and Medicaid, guide the representative, and Key Bank is the investment trustee through their trust department. By the way, Key Bank is the investment trustee for multiple pooled trusts across the country. So what can you use it on? Essentially, you can use it on anything that's for the sole and exclusive benefit of the beneficiary that does not include something Medicaid would pay for and does not include food or shelter. Can't use it for rent, property taxes, mortgage, utilities, or groceries. You can go out to eat, that's entertainment. You can go to McDonald's, but you just can't use it for the household groceries. The idea is that we're supplementing the benefits that Medicaid gives you and Social Security gives you. So you can pay for medical costs that Medicaid's not going to pay for. That's a lot. Dental work, more eyeglasses, you're all there, you understand that Medicaid doesn't give you a lot, especially if you need an adaptive wheelchair. Social needs, you can join a gym, you can go to school, you can even take a vacation. Now, there's one caveat to the sole exclusive benefit when it comes to vacations. The rule states that if by the nature of the disability, the beneficiary cannot take a vacation or can't travel without a companion, then the trust can pay for that companion's expenses. So again, continuing to improve the quality of life. What it can't do is supplant. You can't buy food, you can't buy shelter, or medical items Medicaid would pay for. But as many of you know, there's a way around some of that, and we'll talk about it at the end. So this may be a little hard to see. This is just an example of the types of things and how people have been using our trust. There's many more. But again, you can have memberships in gyms. We can pay for your cable TV, the telephone, cell phone. If there's attorney fees for setting up something, you can pay your attorney. Lots and lots of things. Buy clothing, all this. People, what we try to work with the beneficiaries to do, where there's some things, as you know, that the trust cannot pay for, we try to take the load off their monthly check by paying those other trusts to free up money of the monthly check to pay for the things that they can't pay for out of the trust. Often cell phones and cable. We work through a personal representative. The reason is that if we were to give cash to a beneficiary, then of course that endangers their public benefits by making their resources too high. And of course, often the people we serve just don't have the cognitive ability to handle their money. We know that. So there's a personal representative, and that's the person who works with us to make the distribution requests and make sure we have the documentation of the expenditure. Now, this personal representative does not need to have any legal standing as far as a guardianship, power of attorney. It can be anybody the person establishing the trust feels comfortable with fulfilling that role. Often it's a parent, but we ask when the trust is established to please identify a successor representative, because it's unlikely that the parent's probably going to predecease their child. So need to have somebody as a backup in case that happens. But that person's very important to us, because as that fiduciary responsibility we talked about, we have to make sure that trust can be protected against any reviews by Social Security or JFS for Medicaid purposes. We can only do that if we have receipt documentation. Now they can access the trust in a lot of different ways, and we try to make it as easy as we can. Often it's a cable bill or cell phone bill. Send us the bill, we will pay that directly. You want to buy a computer from Best Buy, give us the quote from Best Buy, we'll check out to Best Buy directly. You want to buy a car, give us the quote from the dealer, KeyBank will write check out directly to the dealer. We can do all that. A parent maybe buys things for their child on their credit card. Give us the receipts, we can reimburse the parent. We also have a new, I think it's coming up on a screen here in a minute. I think it's the next screen, actually. There we go. A new product that we're offering called a TrueLink card. Now, many of you are familiar with the Stable card, I'm quite certain. But this is the same card pretty much. Stable uses TrueLink. Ours operates this way. If this depends on the cognitive ability of the beneficiary, but if that person has the ability to use a debit card, we can give the person this TrueLink debit card, Visa debit. And what happens is the representative tells us they want to buy these kinds of things, and this is how much money we need. We will go ahead and load that money onto the card, and we have categories we enable. If they're going to go clothing shopping, we enable clothing. Or they're going to go to restaurants, we'll enable restaurants. So they can use the card for those purposes. It makes it helps create independence. It's important we get receipts of those though, because example would be, say you want to go clothing shopping at Walmart. Well, Walmart sells groceries, so we've got to have the receipt that shows you bought clothing. But the TrueLink card has been a big help in helping fostering independence. We try to make it as easy as possible. Let's talk a little bit about convenience. With our trust, you fill out a few forms. The forms are not very long. You fill out an account agreement because remember you're joining the trust, and a couple supporting documentation. When we get that account agreement, we ask you to send it over to us. You can scan and email it to us. If it looks acceptable, looks complete, we will say, fine, you can fund the trust. You simply mail us a check, we put it in the trust. We do not require an attorney to sign off on the trust. Our trust was created years ago. Our board doesn't feel it necessary that the attorney has to sign off on the account agreement. So you can create it pretty quickly. When you need a distribution, we have a form, of course. You can send that form in, also scan and email that form to us. When we get that request, we will send that request electronically to KeyBank, and KeyBank usually cuts a check the same day. Now it's got to be mailed from Cleveland. So we tell people 4 or 5 business days to expect money or reimbursement or whatever it is. So our role, we have that fiduciary responsibility to the beneficiary. We guide the representatives. The representatives send us those distribution requests for us to review, approve, etc. We have to make sure they're in line with the regulations, make sure we get documentation to defend that trust. And I will tell you, there are times where you'll get a Social Security worker or a JFS worker that never heard of a special needs trust, some office someplace, and they're going to say, well, we're going to deny this because they've got too many resources. When that happens, we defend it. We have an attorney, we pay, the beneficiary doesn't pay it. We pay the beneficiary to do, the attorney to do the administrative appeal. And of course, we win those because remember, the trusts are rooted in Social Security regulations. So it's sometimes just a hassle, but we take that on. And of course, our responsibility to work with KeyBank. So let's take a moment and talk about Stable a little bit. I know you're going to get a presentation tomorrow. Stable, of course, is a very good program, and they work well alongside of special needs trusts. When people call me, and I'll make this offer as I always do, anybody please call me if you just want to talk about your situation and help sort it through. It's not unusual for me to say you just need a Stable account. Let's talk a little bit about the differences. With the first party trust, we didn't talk about costs, and I saw that in the poll. we collect the first $1,000 when it's funded as a one-time setup fee. After that, we will collect, once it's a year old, $250 a year as our administrative fee. That's the extent of our fees. KeyBank, as the investment manager, they charge 60 basis points, which is, I think, 0.6 of 1% annually. And then they charge a $50 administrative fee annually and a $25 tax fee annually. And that's the extent of the fees. Now, with that, it's not a lot of money, except if you don't have a lot of money. So sometimes if you're only going to put a few $1,000s into an account, and that's all there is, then stable is more likely the best option for you. But if there's an inheritance involved, if there's a big lump sum check someplace, too much for stable, or more money is expected on down the line, then you want to consider a first priority trust. But here's how they work well together. First of all, let me back up a second. Stable is an investment account. Now, this is where there's a difference. You may recall I emphasized that the trust is just that, a trust with fiduciaries in KeyBank and Disability Foundation. An investment account's a little different. The accountability for stable falls on the beneficiary, it doesn't fall on stable as far as defending it before IRS or wherever it goes. There's a little bit of a difference, but it's not been challenged and it's a national act. So unlikely that there would ever be a problem with it, but that's where the beneficiary has a responsibility for those receipts to make sure they maintain those. Stables administered by the State of Ohio Treasurer's Office. And this is where they work alongside well. If the person has to pay rent, remember the trust can't pay that. So if they have a stable account and say they have too much money to open it, just to put it on stable, they can open up a trust, but we can move money into the stable account anytime they wish, and that person can pay their rent. Stable's debit card probably also gives a little more flexibility because it's not as restricted in ours. So there's another reason they may be able to use it for independence. Stable's an excellent program, but that's the differences between the two. In addition, the Medicaid payback is better with stable, as they'll tell you tomorrow. You may recall I said with ours, with a trust, Medicaid payback goes back to all costs incurred on behalf of the beneficiary during their lifetime. It's not the same with stable. Stable's clock starts ticking when they open the stable account. So that's my presentation. I can see there's chat. There must be questions in that. Here we go. Are there questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I am going to ask a question since you just finished. They can feel free to type in something. And then what we'll do is if you can put in your question, we can read it off, but I'll be shutting off the recording shortly. And then you can just open up and, ask freely if you want, unless you are comfortable while we're recording, you can feel free to unmute and ask your question. But one question I had wondered, well, I have a couple questions here. So when you have a pooled trust, and I know in the Dayton area, we have several families that with the military or other that move to another state.
Yes.
How does that work? If we establish a pooled trust, with you in Ohio or someone else in Ohio, how does that work when you move?
Excellent point, Patty. And I wish I would have thought of that, bring it up before. Yes, we can only administer a pooled trust in the state of Ohio. However, there are similar pooled trusts in every state. And we just in the last few months, we moved one to California, we moved one to Tennessee, we've received them from Florida. So yes, they're going to have to move the trust, but that can be done. And the reason for that is that people don't know. The reason is Medicaid regulations are different in each state. And we just simply can't be familiar with every state's Medicaid regulations.
There is a question here. are the limits capped on both stable and I guess it's the third party, the trust?
Stable has caps, and I'm sure they'll explain those to you tomorrow. We have no caps. There's no limits on a first or a third party trust. You put as much into it as you wish. The only limit is, and you have to make your own decisions based on your own situation on how much money you want to start out with. Realize we're going to take $1,000. So it may not be prudent to put $1,000 into a trust and only put another 2,000 or 3,000 in it. But there's no limits on how much you put into it.
There was one asking how to get a copy of the slides. We put a link in there for those. It takes you to the Google Salt drive, but we also upload it to the live binder. If you have trouble getting into those, just let us know and we'll send it directly to you. Let's see, can you review who qualifies for a special needs trust? And did you say the person cannot be able to work, or is it by diagnosis such as autism?
No, they can work. They can work, but they can't be what they call gainfully employed. And Social Security is going to define that, really. I mean, they're going to measure that. But essentially, the big part of it is that there's a physical or mental impairment that could be going to last no less than 12 months, could result in death, and they cannot be what Social Security considers to be gainfully employed. And I can't think of it at the moment. There's a threshold, though, the Social Security uses about how much they can earn a year or earn a month. But they base it on that. It's limited on how much they can earn and then their physical or mental condition. Was the second part of that question?
They were just about asking who qualifies for the special needs trust. And you mentioned about the work. They asked if the person cannot be able to work, or is it by diagnosis?
Yeah. And Social Security, by the way, has a list. They have a list of diagnoses that are automatic that they will use. And so when you go to the Social Security office to become eligible for SSI, they're going to compare it against all that. One other aspect of a qualification, age. And of course, you can be any age to establish a pooled special needs trust. An individual special needs trust, you must be 65 or younger, or 64 and younger. That language was not included in the regulation for pooled trusts, so we are able to establish trusts 65 and older, of any age, essentially any age. That has recently been challenged in many states. Ohio is one of them. We don't know how that's going to come out, but for right now, we can establish them for any age. And that really becomes beneficial for families that they're getting older, they're going into a retirement facility, they sell the family home, they keep a few dollars in a trust.
There is a question here about the ABLE account. I'll read it. It may be something you might have to refer to tomorrow night, but can I open an ABLE account directly to the Ohio Department of Treasury? And if so, what are the fees?
You should talk to them tomorrow, but that's where you establish them with that department. But you should talk to them about the fees. I can tell you they're very, very minimal. But we do not administer that program, so we can't talk a whole lot about it.
So one question I have here, I didn't type it in, but I'll just ask is, so what happens if, so you say you have a personal representative, on the trust.
Yes.
You might list one or two. What becomes of the trust, or what happens when those personal representatives, if they are no longer there, what happens then? Who appoints a new one, or what happens at that point?
We try to go back to the source of the establishment of the trust as close as possible and ask who can be the representative. In a lot of cases, they're getting the assistance of providers, group home providers. And sometimes the person moves from one provider to another provider so that the representative changes to the other provider. But in the case of families, we try to find a sister or brother, someone that knows that person will work with whoever is the case manager perhaps for that individual and help find somebody that way that makes sense that will take on the role as representative.
So if they're
Of
not
course, if
listed
they-
on the, okay, if they're not listed on the trust, then you'll find.
We'll find
someone.
somebody, yes.
What are the benefits of the individual special needs trust?
Over a pooled trust, they can put, if that, I assume that's the question, over
Yeah.
a pooled trust. The attorney can build in some more protections. They can build in a trust protector, which is, they can appoint a trustee, first of all. In our case, you've got us, but with the individual trust, they appoint the trustee of their choice. You can build in protections so that if the family doesn't like that trustee, they can change the trustees. They can sometimes, I believe, mingle them into a family trust some way, but I'm not totally familiar with that. But I know they can build a few more benefits in for the beneficiary than we are able to do.
Does that answer your question, Kevin? I'll give him a chance. Yeah, he said that answers his question. Okay.
I would say this, that if you're considering an individual trust, I would talk to an attorney about that and ask them, what can you do in this? Especially if you have a family attorney, they'll tell you, is it better for them to have that person draft a trust, or is it better just go get a pooled special needs trust?
Next question. There's actually two questions in this chat. Should we wait to set up a special needs trust since our child is only 16 and we don't know if she will be gainfully employed, is the first question. And the other question is, what happens if we set up the special needs trust and then is found to be not eligible later?
The special needs, first of all, special needs trust is irrevocable. So once you establish it, you cannot cancel it, but you of course make distributions out of it. I don't recommend that you establish a trust until you see there's a real need, unless you're going to do one testamentary to establish it to handle your the child's inheritance. But remember, the key is it's protecting Medicaid or SSI. So if the child is not receiving benefits from either one, there's no real purpose to establishing a trust. Plus, remember, once you fund it, we're going to start taking fees out of that. And if the child is not using that trust, it doesn't make any sense. So I would wait until you know better whether you're going to need that trust before you set one up. Unless you want to do it testamentary, and then you could do it a third party and have that done. Doesn't cost you anything except for part of the setup fee, and then it's done.
And then the second part of that was, what happens if we set up the special needs trust and then find is found to be not eligible later?
For Medicaid?
Let me see. Marie, was that in reference to Medicaid, the eligibility part?
Just what to do if we find out that, oh, now she can be gainfully employed, but we have the special needs trust.
Well,
What do we do with it then?
Yeah, what's going to happen is the person's not going to be eligible for Medicaid or SSI, but the money's still in the trust, and you can still access it for distributions. It's just you can't cancel. Once it's established, you just can't. We just can't give you a check for the whole trust. You'd have to use it. But yes, it's going to not serve you very well because you've got that money protected and restricted. That's true.
The next question I see is, can you repeat what the fees from Key Bank are?
Key Bank charges annually 60 basis points on the value of that investment, which is 0.6%. That's an annual fee. They also charge a $50 annual administrative fee, and they charge a $25 annual tax fee. The investment, by the way, we didn't talk about that. The investment itself is a very conservative investment. It is invested according to the conservative investment policy of the Dayton Foundation. The purpose of that investment, the key bank is directed to do, is to protect the money and not subject it to major changes in the economy. So that's how it's invested. It's not going to make a whole lot of money. It's not going to lose money. It's going to remain relatively stable.
And I think that's the next question was, when you put money into a trust, is it invested so the money grows, or how does that work?
Yes, it's invested in a very conservative investment. There's a complicated investment policy the Dayton Foundation has established, and then that is reviewed, by the way, the performance of that is reviewed annually by the Disability Foundation Board with the key bank. It's reviewed by the governing board of the Dayton Foundation. So it's monitored very closely.
And you had gone back there on the fees well, back, we were talking about, you had mentioned that when setting up a trust, you're talking about investments. So as a parent, like, sometimes we gather like 401ks and, gather up some of that money, your house might get sold or whatever, these large chunks of money, but for them, someone that's for down the road, like when we pass away. So, but they can set up a special needs trust with a zero balance, but just pay the fees for the setup. Is that what I understand?
If you establish a third-party trust, I'm glad you raised that question. You can set that up testamentary. It's the same $1,000 setup fee for the both flexible spendings trust. The difference with the third party is if you set up testamentary, we will actually collect 500 of that 1,000 when you establish the testamentary trust. But then no more money is collected till it's funded, and no more fees kick in until it's funded. So you pay $500, you've got testamentary trust, third-party trust, and we give you language to tie it to your will, and that's very, very important so that your executor knows it exists. And then it just sits there until it's funded upon your death.
We have a question here, and kind of with two-part question. Who qualifies for the stable account? And then the second part is there a restriction or gainful employment like special needs trust?
The definition I'm telling you is the definition of Social Security. So that they serve people with Social Security. It's the same restriction on employment and disability, same definition of disability, because that's the Social Security definition. Stable, you should talk to them tomorrow, but I know there's an age limit. It used to be 22. It may still be 22. The presenting condition had to present itself by the age of 22, I believe, or 26, I believe, for stable. But again, you should get that information from stable. I don't want to mislead you at all, give you bad information. It is age restricted though, to start.
I don't see any questions after that, but I wanted to ask you to review the card is a new thing, right? That's something that's been new,
Yes.
A new process. Can you just review that again? Because that's something, the transactions, when you use the card, it pulls directly from the trust, or is it, can you just review that process again?
What happens is that when there's a request comes from a representative that my son would like $200 to go clothing shopping and go out to eat. At that time, then we will electronically put $200 onto the card at that point, and we will enable categories the card may be used on. And if we say clothing and shopping and he tries to go to a gas station, he can't use it for that. It's restricted to the categories we enable. Now, in some cases, we enable a lot of categories because they want to use it for a lot of purposes. But so that's what happened. The card then is restricted that way. So that when they go to do that shopping, they will have $200 if that's what they request, and it will not let them use any more than that. But again, that gives them some independence. They hold the card. When we get the card, we give it to them or the representative, whoever's doing the shopping. So all they do is request it, we put it on there, and they go shopping. But they still got to give us receipts because of the nature that there's you still can't draw deep enough into how it was used with most stores.
And so with that, it would be protected in the sense of there would be, so if you would move $200 in there and say they lost it or someone theft or whatever, it would be limited to that purchase anyway, right? That
And
amount.
if they lose it, we cancel the card and we'll reissue another one. As
Okay,
soon as
'cause
we
that,
find out, they can tell us and we'll just cancel it and it can't be used. And we had, interestingly enough, there was a big breach of a number nationally of cards last week, and one of our cards was in it. And we could tell right away because every time they use it, we get a report of the store, and we were seeing 500 for this and 500 for that. Well, none of that went through. TrueLink stopped it. And a new card was issued to that person. So there's some protection there.
it's good to know. So there is another question here. So in a pooled trust, does the monies that the pooled trust makes get dispersed back to the participants?
Every quarter that participant gets a quarterly bank statement from KeyBank. It'll show, of course, all the distributions taken out, money put in. It will show investment income, and that is investment income goes to that beneficiary's account. It's directly, the investment income goes to the beneficiary in their account, just as the investment fees are charged to that account. But no, we do not make money off of the beneficiary's investment. No.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. And I think I asked all mine, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in. We still have, quite a few more minutes here. But I know in the poll, there was like there was a lot of haven't heard the presentation before, and there were several that did. So let's see, it says, what is a typical quarter return percentage?
I can't tell you. I can tell you this, that it's very stable, and in a year, depending on how much money you have there, you may make a few percentage in a year in investment income. But you could, in any given quarter, you may lose a little bit, you may gain a little bit. It's relatively stable. But if you have a big account, you're probably going to make a little money. But again, this is not an investment you put in to make money. It's to protect it.
There's a question out here asking for your contact information. Can you put it directly in the chat box? Are you able to type that in, or?
Sure. I would think you'd have that. Let's see.
Yeah, I can look it up here and get it into.
Let's see here.
I don't know if
First
you
of
have
all, give me the phone number.
Yep, phone number and email. And while he's typing, or waiting for any more questions to come through, as referenced, we are having a session tomorrow night. It is on stable and special needs trusts compared. So you kind of get a side-by-side presentation, of both angles, and you can ask questions about the stable, and then you'll have, someone representing a trust account as well that they can answer questions. So you'll have, that presentation. I think it's helpful coming off a guardianship last month and then into the special needs trust. It's just something that usually flows together. And then the stable account is something that was started in 2016, I believe, which is all these services or all these tools are very helpful, with saving and especially regarding your benefits. So that's tomorrow night. So let's see here. I'm going to stop the recording at this point so we can open it up if anybody feels, would like to just speak directly. 1 second.